this would be a good story because it was an amazing trip, and there are a lot of different little like funny stories that happened along the way, and so I'm just going to be talking about the trip. So I guess to get started, I signed up for this trip through a tour group called EF Tours, and it's basically a tour group that like designs trip itineraries for student groups to go to Europe, or I don't know if they have tours outside of Europe, but I signed up for this trip to Germany, Austria, Italy, and Switzerland. And so it was like 45 students from my high school, and then 4 teachers from my high school that kind of went as chaperones. And we had this itinerary. We were just going to go to Europe and have this jam-packed like 10-day trip. So let's start with the flight there. So a fun fact about me is that I get very plane sick, car sick, boat sick, everything sick. So I was very worried about this trip and that I would be throwing up with a group of students from my high school and teachers that I didn't really know, and that did happen. So we first flew from where I live in the US to Munich, Germany, and I got sick on the flight. I was throwing up, and all of the kids around me were like handing me their barf bags and like feeling really bad for me, so I was really embarrassed, but it was okay. And then we had a layover in Munich before flying to Frankfurt, and when you fly from the US to Europe, you typically leave in like the evening and then you land in the morning. So basically you're landing in the morning on like an all-nighter, unless you got a lot of sleep on the plane. And I was really sick, and so all of the students were just sitting at our gate waiting for the flight, and everyone was sleeping, but I was like running back and forth to the bathroom to throw up. So the trip didn't start out great, but that was okay. Everyone was like helping me out and giving me barf bags and everything. But anyway, we then landed in Frankfurt, I believe, and we waited at the airport for our bus driver and tour guide to come meet us. So I guess the tour group like sets up a tour guide and bus driver to be with you the whole trip. And so they met us at the airport, and we got in this big bus, all of our students and teachers from my school. By the way, I don't know if I said this trip was the summer after my junior year of high school, so this was in 2017, so it was like 5 years ago. But anyway, we rode in the bus to Rothenburg, Germany, and we got to get out and do a little bit of sightseeing that first day. We were all like dead tired, but we got to walk around Rothenburg and kind of see the sights. I remember there was this huge Christmas store, like this store that just had thousands of like Christmas ornaments and decorations, and so that was really cool. And then we went and checked in to our hotel for the night. We were basically just staying a night there before driving to Munich. So we stayed in this hotel. My friend and I got put in a room together. That was kind of a fun aspect of the trip, was that every night the teachers would like first place that we went was to Dachau, which, if you don't know, is a concentration camp from the Holocaust. So it was really sad, but really interesting to see. We had like a tour where we got to walk around the concentration camp and see all of that. So it was really interesting and really like enlightening to learn about the Holocaust. But yeah, it was also very sad. So after that, I think we went to this castle and we got to walk around and tour the castle. And this was kind of the day that I met a bunch of other girls on the trip. And so it was really fun to kind of form like a bigger group of girls, and it was really fun. So I'll try and find a picture to put up of that group of girls at this castle. But it was really fun to kind of have a group of friends to hang out with. I don't remember a ton from that first day, but I do remember that once we got to our hotel, one of the teachers was like, okay, you guys can go take the subway into downtown Munich and be back by midnight. So it was fun to have like that much freedom, and we all took the subway into downtown Munich, and we like walked along this waterfall, and we went into this like alleyway that had a bunch of graffiti. I don't know, it was really cool. And we also went to this bakery and got these like fruit tarts. So it was really good, and I think it was just fun to have that much freedom. Like, I don't think I'd ever been on a trip or vacation by myself, like without parents. So it was pretty fun to have that much independence in Europe. But anyway, so the next day, I know we were staying at this hotel in Munich, and it was a pretty big hotel. Most of the other hotels we stayed in on the trip, it was like we rented out the whole thing for our tour, but this one, it was really big. And so we had like a big free breakfast, which was really good. And then we got in the bus and headed to the Neuschwanstein Castle. I know I'm probably not saying that right, but it's a really famous castle in Munich, which is actually what Cinderella's castle at Disney World is based off of. So it probably looks really familiar. Again, I'll try and find a picture of it. But we had to like hike up to this castle, so it was a pretty strenuous hike, like uphill. Legs were burning, and I'm pretty athletic, so other people were probably struggling even more. But yeah, it was like this hard uphill hike, and we finally got to this like drawbridge, like hanging bridge, and you go out on it and you can see just the castle kind of in the distance. But it was like so pretty, like such a good view of this castle. And I think we actually got to go inside of it as well afterward. But most of what I remember about that day is that it was pouring rain, and I did not have a rain jacket. I didn't even own a rain jacket until I went to college, so I didn't have a rain jacket, and it was just pouring rain, and wasn't very fun. But it was a beautiful castle, and it was so cool to see. And so I loved Munich. I thought it was a beautiful city. And so then we spent another night in Munich before getting on the bus and driving to Venice. So it's a pretty long drive from Munich crystal store, so it was all this fancy jewelry, and it was really fun. But the main thing I remember about Austria is that my friends and I were walking around trying to find somewhere to eat lunch, and we stumbled upon this tiny little shop. There was nobody in there, no one in there, but it said like a slice of pizza for $2 or whatever, and so we were like, sure, we'll get a slice of pizza and keep walking around. And so we go in and we each ordered a slice of pizza, and we went up to this like back room they had at the restaurant. Again, no one was in there, but we were just waiting for our pizza to come out, and the guy at the restaurant comes out with the pieces of pizza, and they're on these huge pizza pans, and each slice was like a quarter of an extra large pizza. So it was like at least like 3 or 4 slices worth of pizza, and that's just something that like I still remember to this day. It was like this giant pizza coming out. I don't remember how much I ate of it, but I remember like taking pictures and sending them to my mom, so it was funny. But anyway, then we all got back in the bus and we continued on to Venice. And so when we got to Venice, we were basically renting out the whole hotel. It was like a really tiny hotel. So I think we like rented out the whole thing, and they actually made us dinner in like their dining room at the hotel, which was so fun. And it was like really authentic Italian food. I think the first night we had like a pasta with red sauce as our first dish, and then we had like chicken and vegetables for our second dish, but I just remember it being so good. And in Venice, like I said, it was kind of just like a lottery of who you were going to be rooming with for the night. And so in Venice, I was rooming with my friend, but then also these 2 other girls that we didn't know. So we were in a 4-person room, which I was kind of nervous about, but the first night went well, but I will tell you about the second night in a second. Anyway, so that first day in Europe, after the first day in Venice, we first got to go and see a glass blowing demonstration. I guess it's like really common or popular in Venice, like glass blowing, and so we saw this demonstration, which was so cool. And after that, we got to go into this like store that they had where they were selling all of these amazing like glass sculptures and vases and jewelry and everything. It was so beautiful. I didn't buy anything because it was like crazy expensive, but it was like so beautiful. And then we went and we were allowed to go on a gondola ride. So a few of my was very attractive, very cute guy, and my friend that I was with leans over the bridge and she yells, "Kiss me," in Italian. That was the one phrase that she learned how to say before we went to Italy, and she yells, "Kiss me," at this gondola driver, and right then he looks up at her, like up on the bridge, and says, "Ciao bella," which is like, "Hello beautiful." And so I think that made her whole life. She was like so happy about that. She was like screaming. But anyway, yeah, that first day in Venice was really fun. I think we got gelato. You have to. I think I got like lemon gelato, but I don't remember. So it was really fun, other than one of my friends getting food poisoning, which I felt so bad about. We ate lunch together too. We both got a pepperoni pizza at this restaurant, but hers she got with mushrooms on it, and so that was the only thing we ate different all day. So it must have been the mushrooms. But by the time we were like getting back on the bus to go to the hotel, she was just pale, like green, and she got sick on the bus, and she was sick all that night. I felt so bad for her. There were a lot of people that got sick on this trip, like multiple people with food poisoning. A couple people got strep throat and had to go to like the urgent care to get antibiotics. So we just like didn't have the best luck. But anyway, we got back to our hotel that night and we had another amazing dinner. I remember they brought us like a white lasagna as an appetizer. It was just like really cheesy and creamy, and it was so good. And then we had like veal and potatoes, I think, for our entree, and then they brought us chocolate salami for a dessert, which was like kind of like a roll of like a chocolate truffle with like nuts and maybe like wafers in it. But I guess you like roll it up and then slice it in pieces, and so it was amazing. But this night was not very enjoyable, as I alluded to earlier. So that night I was in my friend's room, and I think we were just like playing cards and hanging out until like 11 or something. But yeah, we were hanging out, and so I go back to my room, and the two girls that we were rooming with were already asleep. And so I go into the room to try and go to bed, and one of the girls is snoring louder than I have ever heard anyone snore. 10 times louder than my dad. And like, you know dads and they're snoring. But she was snoring so loudly. And so my friend and I were trying to go to sleep, and we're looking at each other like this is not gonna work. And my friend eventually like put in headphones, but I didn't even have headphones. So I was like, what am I gonna do? And so I went back to our other friend's room. We had like 4 friends that were sleeping in a different room, and I went back and knocked on the door, and I was like, can I sleep in your room? And they were like, I guess so. But it was this really tiny room with 4 single beds, so it was like packed, and I tried to fall asleep in there, but I felt like I was a bother, and so I went back to my room and I decided to get some extra pillows and blankets and make a bed for myself on the bathroom floor because I could not sleep with this girl snoring so loudly, and so I made a bed for myself on the bathroom floor and I slept there. I probably did not sleep very much, and looking back on it, I'm really thankful that none of my roommates had to use the bathroom in the middle of the night, because I would have just been laying on the floor. But anyway, I fell asleep. It was fine. That was our last night in Venice, so whatever. But anyway, we got on the bus again really early the next morning to drive to Lucerne, Switzerland. So that was another long drive. Like, I don't know if it's like an 8 or 9 hour drive. But we did get to stop in Verona, Italy, and that's where, if you don't know, that's where like Romeo and Juliet takes place. And so we got to see Romeo or Juliet's balcony in Verona, like that she stands on in the play, I guess. So that was really cool. That was the main thing that we did in Verona. But then we continued on to Lucerne, Switzerland, and yeah, it was beautiful there. I will say our bus driver was pretty crazy, and he was like winding through the Swiss mountains, and I got very car sick again, so yeah, not very fun. But once we got to our hotel, it was gorgeous, like so pretty up in the mountains. I don't remember the food being very good at that hotel, but it was a gorgeous hotel, and I was just with my friend for those 2 nights, so it was really nice to be in just us two in a room. But that first night, in the middle of the night, I think everyone in the hotel heard this really loud bang, like this really loud noise coming from one of the rooms, and everyone was like, what was that? But I don't think we got up or anything. We just like went back to sleep. But we found out the next morning that there were 2 boys from my school on this trip that were in a room with bunk beds. So like one was on top and one was on bottom. And I don't know if they were fooling around or what, but in the middle of the night, the top bunk fell onto the bottom bunk, like crashed through onto the bottom bunk. And so I don't know how they didn't die. Like, that sounds terrible, but yeah, the bunks crashed onto each other, and our tour guide was like interrogating the boys, like, what did you do wrong? Were you jumping on the bed? Did you break the bed? Like, what did you do? But yeah, it was kind of interesting because us being from America, one of my teachers was like, if we were in America, these boys would be suing the hotel for the bed. But you're talking about like the boys having to pay for the damages. I don't know, it was just kind of like a cultural difference that was interesting. But anyway, that first day in Lucerne, or I guess it was like our only day in Lucerne, we went to Mount Pilatus, which is like a famous mountain in Switzerland, and you get to ride a boat across Lake Lucerne, I believe, and it takes you to where Mount Pilatus is, and then you take a cogwheel train up the mountain, and then you like do a little hiking or like walking up steps to get to the top. And so it was beautiful. One funny story about that is that the cogwheel train going up, I think they had already let like everyone that they were going to let in the train was the first person in line for like the next train. So everyone was already like settled in their train cars already, but the guy letting people through was like, oh, you can go through, like go find a seat, I'm sure there's empty seats. And so I'm like walking up the steps trying to find a train car that has an empty seat, and everyone's like staring at me in these full cars. And finally I get to one car that has this huge Korean family in it. It was like this big family of all Korean people, and they started motioning to me like, come in, we'll make room for you. And so I like went in, and they scooched to the side and made room for me to sit right in the middle of them. And so I sat in the middle of this big family for like the whole ride up, and they were kind of like speaking Korean to each other, and I had no idea what was going on, so it was kind of funny. But anyway, we got to the top of the mountain, and again, it was so beautiful, and we took some really pretty pictures. Like that group of friends that I had took gorgeous pictures. I'll try and find one again. They were like some of my favorite pictures that I've ever taken. So yeah, I think that was like most of what we did in Lucerne. I do remember that night at the hotel, our hotel was like up in the mountains, as I said before, and we could walk to like a waterfall and a field, and there were like mountains that you could climb, and there was a girl on the trip who was climbing like a hill or mountain, and she slipped and fell and dislocated her shoulder. And so that night my teacher had to take her to the hospital to like get her shoulder set back into place. And so, like I said, this trip was like, we did not have great luck with this trip. And I think, yeah, that teacher was my AP European history teacher, and she said at the end of the trip we all had to go around and say our favorite part of the trip, and she said her favorite part was getting to learn about the European healthcare system, because she had to take like 3 different kids to the hospital. But anyway, yeah, so it was really fun. I loved Switzerland. I'm from Switzerland, so this was actually like my 4th time there, but it was so beautiful. So yeah, that was our last like big destination in Europe. After that, we basically just drove back to Heidelberg, Germany, I believe, and we got to do a little sightseeing there. I think we like got lunch and everything, but it was kind of just a place to stay for a night to get us back to like where the airport was. And so we stayed in a hotel that night. I remember being with 2 other girls in that room. But it was funny because I don't even remember that night. I was so exhausted from this trip that I don't even remember like going into our room or doing anything that night. I just fell asleep. Like, I just remember waking up the next morning. So somehow I like passed out in the room, which was really funny. But yeah, I was just like so exhausted from this trip, and yeah, but then the next day we flew out and we came back home. So yeah, this was an amazing trip. Like, it was crazy having like 45 students from my school and 4 teachers from my school that I hardly knew, and traveling around Europe with them. And obviously there were bad parts of the trip, but overall it was amazing. with a car. I was 17 when I went to Europe, and she surprised me with a car when I got home, which I was like so shocked about, my first car. But I named it after my bus driver. Like, you know, people name their cars, so like I jokingly named it after our bus driver in Europe, which was funny. And so my car's name is Klaus, if you were ever wondering. But yeah, so